now you're not accountable for, now I'm not accountable for the way I'm going to behave right now because you made me feel this way. And that's wrong. Right. And that is very immature as well. It's just completely that life doesn't work that way. Right. What we do is often when we're not living in this world of, as you said, EQ as well as resilience, is we're not taking ownership over what we're able to control. And part of that is the awareness. And that's what I love about resilience and EQ are lined up exactly because the first two components, right, of EQ is self-awareness and self-management. And that's what this whole cognitive behavioral therapy part, of resilience, that whole understanding that whatever the event is, you have the ability to control your thoughts about it, how you perceive that. It may be hard because you're naturally not that way, but you have the ability to do so. And then you ultimately will impact the consequence of that, which is comprised of your emotions and your reactions.
This episode is sponsored by Classical Conversations. Since 1997, Classical Conversations has been equipping families like yours with the resources to homeschool with confidence, following a classical curriculum rooted in a Christ-centered worldview alongside other families in a local community. Homeschooling is doable with Classical Conversations. Check out classicalconversations.com/Gibbons for more information. Again, that's classicalconversations.com/Gibbons, Gibbens. What is going on, EQ gangsters? I am here with a now super duper homie of mine. We have done podcast swaps. We've, been connected now. I don't remember exactly how long, but I have had the privilege of knowing Big Joe B for a hot minute now, and just a phenomenal guy. And what's kind of makes it even a bigger blessing is that he is a chief master sergeant in the Air Force. So he is leading and influencing a tremendous amount of people. And it just, when I first met this guy, it just has absolutely blessed me to know, not only am I getting sharpened, Proverbs 27:17 is iron sharpens iron, so Big Joe money sharpens Big Papi, but the fact that he is currently active duty Air Force leading and influencing a tremendous amount of people. He is the podcast co-host of the Llama Lounge Leadership Podcast. Highly recommend you all check it out. Phenomenal content. So he is the Grand Queso, which for those who don't habla means the big cheese. And he is, again, an amazing guy. He's also got certification and training in resilience and coaching. And so not like athletic coaching, but like personal coaching, life coaching, that kind of thing. And so we're going to jump into this particular episode about those areas. So resilience and coaching both are tremendously, and I would argue directly impacted by emotional intelligence. So without further ado, my man, Big Joe B. It's great to have you, bro.
Man, I am honored to be here with the EQ Mafia Don. Oh, man. So excited to be here, brother. Thank you for this opportunity. And anytime I get to connect with you, Noble, man, it juices me up. It juices me up.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay. So Big Joe, so just tell us, how did you get to the point you're at now? And if you would feel comfortable, let's just go way back further than my hairline to when you were a kid. Like, tell us a little bit about your childhood and give us your kind of your personal and professional trajectory that landed you to be an E9 at such a young age.
Okay, yeah. So let me see. So I moved when I was very, very young to the States with my mom. Don't know my biological father, but moved to the States when she married a GI, a public affairs NCO that was stationed here at Osan. So they were together maybe 5, 6 years. I can't really remember, but they ended up separating, and her and I moved to New York City because it was easier for first generation immigrant to be able to get a job out there. She wasn't very skilled in language, and everything else was a challenge. So we moved there. She was a waitress, and I became what we call a latchkey child. So living by myself, and I think that kind of helped me become pretty independent at like the age of 8. And just because of the language barriers, I was the one that was talking to the bill collectors and everything else growing up. We didn't have a lot of money. So there's a lot of challenges there. But I think that kind of helped me gain some of my independence and some skills, just being able to negotiate and have conversations with people at the age of 8. I'm sitting there talking to bill collectors. So it was a unique challenge, but grew up, we moved around quite a bit, and then we ended up moving to Washington State, which is what I consider home. Tacoma, Washington, huge Seahawks fan, huge Mariners fan, all things Seattle. So lived there, went to high school there, graduated, and decided I actually was going to join the Army. Was going to be a combat engineer. And then my uncle, who is a retired chief master sergeant, told me, get my head out of my butt. Told me that I need to join the Air Force. So I did. I switched over, got out of the delayed entry program from the Army, went into the Air Force at once as a civil engineer. Basically, I work on backup power systems, electrical power production. So started that in my career field, moved around quite a bit throughout my career. I did some station in Europe, Asia, quite a few times, like I'm at right now. This is my third tour in Korea. I moved a couple places in the States. And the cool thing is that being a civil engineer career field, I also had the opportunity to be in 2 different communications units, which gave me a different perspective because I was in combat comm with my first assignment because they always need power. So we would roll out together. And then I was also at a fixed communication joint DISA, Defense Information Systems Agency unit in Camp Zama in Japan. So that was a really good assignment. Both of them were very good and gave me different perspectives. And I also did a special duty, which we're going to talk a little bit about how I got into resilience and coaching. I did a special duty in what we call the Airmen and Family Readiness Center, which is a social service center on base, which, all the services have their version of it, but ours is called the Airmen and Family Readiness Center, or AFRC. And I got to do that. And so I was part of a Force Support Squadron social service mission for a while, which really rounded me out because I was an executor. I was the one that gets the job done. An excellent manager, but I didn't have some of these other skills like empathy, the ability to get up and speak in front of large crowds and influence. Generosity and kindness kind of came from there as well. And then emotional intelligence. That was the first time I was introduced to the concept of emotional intelligence when I was a young E6. I'm working in that social service center. So it was a great time. Did that for a while, got back into the operational side of things in Korea back in 2015 to 18. Went out to what we call United States Air Forces in Europe and got to spend some time in Germany. Came back to Korea recently, and it's just been a great tour. So really exciting. Love what I've learned. And one thing I'll tell you about that special duty working at the social service center is it made me not just a better leader and airman, but a better person. And it really opened up my eyes to some of the challenges I think that come from when you're your childhood, right? We all have some baggage that we bring along with us. And something that I noticed, and it took me a while to figure it out, was that special duty helped me get out of my comfort zone. And I realized growing up in my home, I had a mom, and much like a lot of Asian families growing up, and I just know that because I'm from an Asian family, and I hear this from my friends. There's a lot of pressure to do well academically, like extreme pressure to the point where you score a 97, and the question is, where's the other 3? Right. And I didn't realize how much that really impacted me until later on, looking in introspectively on what was going on. But when that happens over and over again, I realized I would not dare take an AP class. because I was afraid that, it's harder and I might get a B and I wasn't going to be able to bring home a B. So that bled into my military career. It's like I never wanted to do anything that I wasn't going to be excellent at automatically. And of course, that means I'm not stepping out my comfort zone. I'm really afraid to fail at that point. And it came out in weird ways, emotional ways, anger issues, all kinds of stuff. No, when I didn't do well, it impacted me. So there was a lot of stuff that kind of I gained from that understanding, and I didn't really see it until I stepped out of my career field, totally out of my comfort zone, working at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center, and I started understanding all those things. So it really just did help, and I think now I'm looking for ways to suck at stuff, like finding ways that I'm not going to be great at right away, and it kind of led to a resilience. Really helped bolster that into coaching and leadership and everything else. Now I step into all those things with an open heart, open mind, and ready to not be great at it. And it's just been opened up a whole new world for me, Noble.
Man, that's amazing. So first of all, thank you for sharing your story and even going back to your childhood there. And there's a ton of stuff that we could unpack just about that. Being a translator for your mom at 8 or 9 years old and talking to the bill collectors and like just there's probably a lot to just unpack from all of that experience. And then, from there, from New York going to Washington State, and then, getting into the Air Force, and then love the concept of getting you completely out of your comfort zone, spending some time at the Family Readiness Center there. Like, so you said you were a young E6 and you made that transition. Mm-hmm. At the time, how much of a growth mindset or learning mindset did you have? Like when you had that, uncomfortable experience, like, okay, I'm going to this readiness center, like, dude, I'm a civil engineer. Like, why on earth am I at this Family Readiness Center?
Right.
Were you automatically, hey man, I'm ready to learn, I'm like bring it, or did that kind of happen over time?
So I think it happened over time, and let me backtrack a little bit. So I got offered that job, and by a former first sergeant of mine who happened to be working over there. I didn't even know there was military that worked there at that time, and yeah, he asked me if I wanted to come work there, and I'm thinking immediately no. Like, and this is not in my swing zone whatsoever. I was like, this does not make any sense. Why would you want me to work there? But he was impressed by my ability to provide effective feedback and evaluate airmen correctly, and as a young E5 at the time. So I think he knew that I would get stuff done, so he asked me to come over there. But I was absolutely not going to take it. I talked to a mentor of mine, and she told me, well, let's go over there. In my mind, I've already turned down this job, but I told him that I would think about it out of respect, because I respect him quite a bit. So, but, I thought about it for a while. I talked to her about it, another mentor, and she took me over there. And I trust her, right? So she takes me over there, and then she asks all the right questions I don't know to ask about the job, about my career progression and all that stuff. And then afterwards, she says, I think you should take this job. You need to take this job. You need to step out your comfort zone. You need to get out of the unit. And I was like, in my mind, oh my goodness, I really don't want to, but I trust you. I have faith in you. So I'll do it. And best decision. And people often ask me, it's like, hey, what was something like a failure or a mistake you made that you turn around? I said, you know what? The one that I really want to share is the one I didn't make, that I almost did. Because most of us will never know what we didn't do, right? What mistake we didn't make. You know what I mean? Like most of us don't know that, because when we turn down these opportunities, we don't know what potential that we did not unlock.
Right.
And right. I think about it like what Goggins talks about in his, he's talked about a couple of podcasts. David Goggins would say that, he made it to Heaven's Gate. And then there's a long list of all his life's accomplishments on that board. And he says his biggest fear was, hey, I didn't do any of those. That's not me. And he's like, no, these are things you're supposed to do, but you turned all these opportunities down. And I'm like, and to me, that resonates with me. And so I tell people the biggest mistake that I did not make was turn down this job, right? Because it changed me for a positive, just so much. It gave me so many opportunities too.
Love that little backstory too, that you were not super excited about, this journey. And it's so funny, dude. We could do a whole nother episode just on this, on the number of times in our lives where we saw decision A or choice A or course of action A as a negative, and how God turns it into a positive, and it
Right.
ends up being a huge blessing in our respective lives and stuff. So that's super cool. That, I mean, it really sounds like how you're talking about it. It sounds like really it was a defining moment
Absolutely.
in pivoting really the direction of your entire career and therefore life.
Yeah, 100%. I think, when you're doing well in your career, whatever you might be doing, if you're doing well, um, behaving the way you are up to a certain point, what it does is it kind of it enables that behavior, right? Whatever it might be. Well, I'll be honest with you. My personal behaviors weren't the best all the way till E6. In the Air Force, E6 is one of the hardest ranks to make. The test is very hard, everything else. So, but I made it through that rank pretty quick. I made it in 6 years, which is very uncommon. So what it did was it continuously reinforced my behaviors of not stepping outside my comfort zone, being very hard on people without not showing much compassion, right? I mean, just being the excellent manager, and you can lean on your technical skills. I mean, in the Air Force, the E6 is called a technical sergeant. You're expected to be technically competent, but to go from an E6 to E7, there's a huge gap that you have to fill, at which you need to have the empathy, the leadership abilities. You're no longer the technical expert necessarily, but you're a manager and leader of teams. So I would have probably, and I can't say for sure, it probably would have taken me a lot longer if I didn't do this job to push. I don't know if I'd be a chief master on right now. I don't, but I know I wouldn't be as good a chief master sergeant as I am now, because I wouldn't be as good a person as I am right now.
Mm, love that. Love that. Man, that is such a great comparison between, being technically competent
Mhm.
versus the soft skills, the people
Yeah.
skills, the empathy, the leadership, the social awareness, the social management skills that are part of ultimately emotional intelligence. And I think we've all probably ran across people. I had a brigade S3 who, genius, brilliant, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in the military.
Mhm.
And dude, his social awareness was like, I was
Mhm.
like, dude, how on earth did you become a brigade three? Like, you just need to run PowerPoint slides all day, bro. Like, that's like don't
Mhm.
leave your computer. Like, you do not need to be in charge of people, kind of thing,
Right.
right? And so, but the military is filled with people that do not have high emotional intelligence. And so,
Mhm.
so anyway, some excellent points. All right, so let's get down to some brass tacks here, bro. So let's define our terms. What is resilience?
So I think, to me, resilience is a lot more complicated than to be able to define. A lot of times people hear the ability to bounce back from adversity, right? I mean, you see it a lot of times, and I picture the common picture I've seen is the tennis ball, not the egg. Because the egg's kind of hard on the outside, but it's soft and it's fragile, right? Where the tennis ball, you could bounce that thing plenty of times and it's going to come back every time, right? So that's what I kind of think of when it comes to resilience, but there's so much more than that, right? I think one of the primary things um, in my personal opinion is it's it's really understanding how things affect you and how you can influence those things, right? So um, one of the cognitive behavioral therapy, like, primary just concepts, is there's an activating event, whatever that might be, a thing that's happened, right? You may have contributed to it or you had nothing to do with it, just happens, right? And then there's your thoughts about that event. How do you interpret it? How do you perceive it? And then how that impacts, what are the consequences of those thoughts? Are you now angry because of it? And does that create what physical things are happening physiologically, as well as what you're going to do now, your behaviors, right? And how that impacts everything. And a lot of people think that you're activating vent leads directly to the emotions, and they take a shortcut and don't realize that they had some contribution to that, right? They contributed to how that is through their thoughts. Now, it might have happened so fast they don't notice it, or there's so many childhood baggage and everything else experienced in life that affect that thought and your perception. But whatever you attach to it, you did that. Right? You have to take ownership over that. And I tell people, it's like when someone says you made me so angry, they're giving away their God-given ability, right, to be able to influence that. You're giving away ownership completely. And that's, I think, a foundational piece of resilience. A lot of people think it's like being Pollyannish, thinking, looking at the silver lining all the time and being blindly optimistic. That's absolutely not the case. It's about finding what you can control about a situation. And the reason why I love that activating event, your beliefs and the consequences of it, that model, is because that's first working on yourself.
Fire, bro. So you just described, we've got something in our mafia, in the EQ mafia. In part of the EQ mafia is our 8-week. We've got an 8-week course worth of content in our membership, and in one of the resources that we provide is something called we call the thought analyzer, which is exactly the process that you just described. And like you said, a lot of people don't realize and understand that process that you just described happens to all of us.
Right.
You just may not be aware of it, but that process is happening, without, it's like, well, can I, how often am I aware of my heartbeat or of my particular blood type? Well, I never really, to be honest with you. And so, well, I mean, unless I'm doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like, oh crap, I feel my heart pounding, whatever. But most of the time I'm not even aware of that stuff. So same thing with our feelings and emotions and our different thought patterns and behaviors a lot of times. And so I remember one time we had just got done with an intense family fellowship with my wife, right? I just got done, me and my wife got done doing a big giant fight. I basically yelled at my wife. That's what we call an IFF, intense family fellowship. And she was waiting for me to get done being Hulk and turn back into Bruce Banner, right? And so she's like, hey Noble, okay, now that you've calmed down and chilled out, she's like, dude, you do realize that you can separate your feeling from your behavior, right? And I was like, no, you can't. I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. She's like, no. Just because you feel angry does not mean that you have to behave angry.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know what planet you're on, but you were smoking crack, babe. Like, that is impossible. Yeah. And she said, no. That's impossible for you. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you that there are many other people that can separate behavior from emotion. And dude, my head exploded. I was like, I don't even know what planet you were on because I couldn't at the time, because my EQ was so low. Right. I had such low emotional intelligence that I couldn't even fathom behaving different than how I felt. I was like, you gotta be an alien, dude. Like, how do you even, I couldn't even cognitively grasp the concept. You know what I mean? So you're so right, dude. And I love that like, when someone says, and I've said it many, many times in my own life, well, Joe made me feel X, fill in the blank. Well, and I love that concept. I just gave control over to you. Right. So now it's like when you do that or say that, now you almost subconsciously also, because I gave you power, now I've given you power to not only make me feel a certain way, but to unmake me feel a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've also given up accountability. You're not accountable for, now I'm not accountable for the way I'm going to behave right now because you made me feel this way. And that's wrong. Right. And that is very immature as well. It's just completely, life doesn't work that way. Right. What we do is often when we're not living in this world of, as you said, EQ as well as resilience, is we're not taking ownership over what we're able to control. And part of that is the awareness. And that's what I love about resilience and EQ are lined up exactly, because the first two components, right, of EQ is self-awareness and self-management. And that's what this whole cognitive behavioral therapy part, of resilience, that whole understanding that whatever the event is, you have the ability to control your thoughts about it, how you perceive that. It may be hard because you're naturally not that way, but you have the ability to do so. And then you ultimately will impact the consequence of that, which is comprised of your emotions and your reactions.
Love it. And to be honest with you, because I have not done a deep dive for myself on kind of unpacking resilience, but I guess I never connected the dots between in order to have resilience, it's important to have self-awareness and self-management. And I guess that totally makes sense. I just had never connected those dots before. So let me ask you this, Joe. So what impacts resilience, and then how important is resilience? So what impacts it and how important? So just start with what impacts it.
Yeah, I think a lot of things impact it in a positive way. I think understanding the awareness. I like to use the word hope a lot because hope is such an amazing, emotion. That feeling, it's more powerful than almost anything out there, right? When it comes to emotions, it's more powerful than fear. I mean, if you have hope, I think it's powerful, right? And the reason why I think resilience is impacted by hope, your personal resilience, and it's a major principle of it, is because if you have hope, it's typically driven because you have some type of true optimism in a situation, and gratitude plays a big part in that. And I know this, I'm throwing a bunch of words in there, but they do all play together, right? When you find that when you're able to counter our negativity bias, that we're normally biased to see things negative. I think the science out there says that, and I'm brilliant. I got a PhD in bro science here, but I think that and science says something like 3 times our brains weigh 3 times more on negative things that happen to us than positive things. You can walk through a store and you'll remember all the negative things that happened in there versus a couple good things that happened as well. Throughout the day, you can probably think that too, because we just kind of blow off the good things. When we take the time to actually consider those things and show gratitude for them, whether it's a gratitude journal, prayer, whatever it works for you, it'll help you develop that optimism because your brain's going to realize there are things that are good, plus you can influence them, right? If you can identify those things. So optimism and hope is important because when we identify things that we can influence in a positive way, it will help our overall resilience because we feel like we have some purpose, right? It really helps us with our purpose. When we don't, the opposite of that is when we're saying things like you make me angry and giving away ownership, over our own control over things, and we're giving away our control to everyone else, it can actually lead to hopelessness because you're like, things just don't work out for me ever. I don't have any control or influence over this. And that's what true optimism to me is. It's identifying what you can influence in a situation and focusing on that. Covey talks about the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. And the circle of influence lives inside the circle of concern. There are 2 circles. The circle of influence is what you can actually influence, you can do things about. Circle of concern are things that you actually care about, but you might not have much influence on it. Some of us focus way more on the things that we don't have any influence over that we care about than what we actually control, right? And when we focus on that smaller circle, the circle of influence, it actually starts to expand. It's interesting, like, because I don't know how many times you work with a leader who focuses on what they can actually control versus all the stuff and loses their mind. Don't you want to follow that leader over the one that just constantly focuses on things that they can't do anything about? So all of that plays into resilience. It really does. Gratitude, hope, optimism, identifying what you can control about a situation, learning about yourself. What is actually making you lose your mind when somebody does something? I've seen it where it's a value maybe that you've been crossed, where you'll walk into like a building and you hold the door open for somebody and they don't even say thank you when they walk in. And our minds attach all this stuff to what that person just did. In reality, if we had a conversation with them, they might not even notice they had something going on in their mind. They might be going through a divorce. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but they're disrespectful. And now I can't stand that person. Right. So there, there's a lot to it. We have to be able to take a pause, separate the event from our emotions, and think about how we're taking that in.
Man, I love that. I absolutely love that. Let me just I'm taking notes here. So if you see me looking away, that's what I'm doing, brother. I was taking mad copious notes here. Okay, so how do you so dude, so like love it, dude. You got like my being is on like super high gear right now, just trying to make the connection between resilience and hope and optimism and gratitude. Love it, dude. Love it. And I love the concept of gratitude journal because again, so I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I grow my hope? Okay, well, how can I grow my optimism? Well, how can I grow my gratitude? And love that concept of doing a gratitude journal, and making that part of even your emotional fitness program. I talked about this in an earlier podcast interview I had today. Is take 1 minute a day, 1 minute, dude, 1 minute, and write down as many things as you possibly can that you're thankful for. 1
Yeah.
minute, not 5 hours of doing
Right.
yoga and downward dog and like, oh man, let me
Yeah.
like meditate on the universe, whatever. Like, no, dude, just take 1 minute. Well, I mean, not that you whatever, do your thing with stretching, but like 1 minute, and how would that impact? Here, check this out, bro. This is kind of a quick detour, but one of my classmates is the director of the Center for Enhanced Performance at West Point. She's a
Mm.
'06 full-bird colonel, and she works with the top 10% of cadets and the bottom 10% of cadets in many cases. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting group, two groups of interesting folks. And I said, well, what are some of the areas that you work on with some of the bottom 10%? She said, confidence. I said,
Mm.
well, how do you help people grow confidence, the cadets grow confidence? And she said, basically, she said, a gratitude journal.
Hmm.
And I was like, what?
Right.
Like, what's the connection between gratitude and confidence? And she's like, the more aware they become of all the good things in their life, that helps to build awareness, like you were talking about, which also helps to build confidence. And I just never made um, that attachment, or that the connection between those. And it's funny because also for me, I love Jesus. I'm a Bible guy, and well, I say I'm a Bible guy. I've read the Bible. I read the Bible. I'm not like a theologian or anything like that. But one
Mm.
of the things it says in Romans, right, is give thanks in all things, right? So be
Mm.
thankful, right? God's big on
Right.
thankfulness. And it's just funny that, science is like now like, oh man, gratitude is really important. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. It is so impactful. And if you do it, the gratitude journal, and one version of the resiliency training program, we used to call it counting blessings. You count your blessings. What were you thankful for today? It'll help through neuroplasticity, like turn away some of this negativity, because some of us get wired so hard on the negative thing that all we see is negative. Right. And you've seen that the cancerous, pessimistic person in a work center, in a unit, in a section, they might be good at what they do, but nobody wants to work with them. Right. I mean, that's really tough. And how does that actually impact that person? Because they could act like, I don't care, I'm doing me, but that has some impact on them inside. They might be shelving it all. And for us in the military, that's an operational readiness issue now. Right. It causes a lot of issues. So when we think about it, EQ can really be resilience. The resilient skills and lessons, they fall into the four major components of EQ, and EQ directly impacts your resilience. So they are interrelated. I could even consider them synonymous in many ways.
Wow, yeah, that's great. That's great. One of the books I'm reading right now is called Emotional Agility, and
Mm.
I agree with you that, because I mean, you could almost argue that emotional agility is resilience. And my, in my little, I guess my perspective is that in order to, like you said, I mean, again, maybe I'm just restating what you just got done saying, but in my opinion, to be more emotionally agile / resilient, you have to be more emotionally intelligent or emotionally
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree with that? Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
absolutely. I think 100%. And the first portion, like if you go through any type of resilience program, I don't care what it's titled, I don't care if it's from what school it's from, you'll see that first you got to work on yourself. and you got to manage yourself. Then you can start managing other people. It doesn't matter if you're talking about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to the University of Pennsylvania's Master Resiliency Training Program. They all walk through that for a reason. You cannot help manage relationships if you can't manage yourself first. And one of the cool principles I think about resilience also, and kind of goes through just character strength. Positive psychology talks about capitalizing on your strengths versus focusing on your weaknesses all the time. It doesn't mean growing, just staying away from growing some of those weaknesses, but understanding that when you live in your strength and you operate in those strengths, it's going to manage your energy, because energy management is a huge part of resilience. When you have to do something that you're not very good at, it drains you, right, Noble? I mean, like, more likely you get more tired because you're doing something that you're not. But when you're being your authentic you, and that's who you are, the chances are you're going to get energized from that versus getting tired. And we know that we make the worst decisions when we're the least mature, when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I mean, the acronym HALT is like the things that, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you're going to make some bad decisions, right? So understanding your energy management is a huge part of resilience, which is going to also tie directly to EQ, because if your energy is low, you're going to have a hard time managing yourself. And you sure are going to, most of the times when people snap at somebody, it's because they're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And that's going to manage your relationships. When you went home from work and you've had a long day and you've been working your butt off all day, and now your family gets the rest of you, they just get whatever's left. And that's going to impact your relationship at home, which will impact your personal resilience. So once again, a lot of ties together.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next question is, how do you develop resilience? So one of the things we talk about is a gratitude journal. What are some other, and then growing your emotional intelligence, based on all your training and your experience and stuff, what are some ways to develop resilience?
So the one thing still kind of plays in that self-awareness piece. And when I just talked about those capitalizing on your strengths, there's a great survey out there called a VIA, Values in Action Survey, viame.org. You can take this, I think it's 120 questions. Now, it used to be 240, but it's about 120 questions. A lot of them are going to be asking you similar questions in different ways so that they can see some congruency in your answers. And it'll give you an idea, a list of 1 through 24 of your character strengths, what you value the most and what you live in. And when you do that, you're going to be able to manage your energy. So I think a key component is understanding yourself and managing your energy, because like I said, if you're not going to be very effective with other people if you're in that hungry, angry, lonely, tired state. So you have to be able to manage your energy, because understanding that we are people and people are social beings, right? If it affects relationships with other people, it's going to affect our own personal resilience. It's just absolutely true. And we don't do anything significant in life on our own. We may do some stuff on it, but nothing of huge significance is done by yourself in this life. So we're interdependent beings. So we got to understand that. So the self-awareness piece is cool, but it's very important. But something else that I think is very important is when you talk about resilience overall, you really have to think about it holistically as social, right? Physical, you have your mental, and then you have your last domain of spirituality. You have to really align those. And most of us are going to be a little bit out of line. Maybe Noble, maybe your spiritual fitness is much better than mine is, but maybe my mental fitness might be, a little bit higher, whatever it might be. We're not going to, but when we're way off, it's like, you ever sat on a bar stool and one leg was much shorter than the other three? You don't feel stable in life. Right? You just don't feel stable, and it's easy to fall off. So now the storm hits and you don't have a stable foundation and you just fall off the bar stool, right? So we have to kind of focus on those things. So spirituality is definitely what means something to you, finding your purpose, identifying those things that really mean something to you. Physical fitness, I think we often consider it. We talk about exercising and all that, eating healthy, but also, are you getting enough sleep? Because that's going to impact your resilience overall. Social is, like we talked about, it's important that you can control yourself so you can manage the relationships you're in, so that you can continue to manage those. So becoming a student of human behavior is important. That, like learning that. And as well, for the military folks that are listening, like, we become students of war, students of technical competency, whatever we're doing, strategic warfare. We need to also, as a leader, be a student of human behavior, with people. And then the last piece is mental fitness, is consistently growing, stretching your mind. I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of whatever it could be. Like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a great, because it's physical, right? But it's also very mental, right? It's extremely mental. So those are great things that you can kind of double dip on. Me running is not just physical fitness for me, it's also mental fitness for me. So a lot of those. But I wanted to share one skill that I think can be life-changing for someone when they're talking about that social fitness, or what we would talk about managing relationships, when EQ, right, is good, active, constructive responding. And we call this ACR. This is a great skill. Have you ever, Noble, anybody ever share something really good with you and you responded in like you just responded very nonchalantly, like, cool, or
Oh, sure.
nice, right?
Sure.
Right. And then or maybe somebody brought something to you and you immediately wanted to share your good news, even though they just brought you some good news, and you kind of like
Yes.
one up them maybe on accident, or you kind of dismissed theirs because you just took over the conversation.
Mm.
A lot of times we don't notice that actually negatively impacts those relationships. And the more of maybe the credit we have, or the balance we have in there, maybe the account balance is high on the positive side, but you're actually taking withdrawals out with that person.
Mm.
This could be your spouse, your coworkers, or whoever it is. And studies show that there's only one way you can respond that will actually build the relationship, and that's active constructive. So the 4 ways you can respond to people are active destructive, which is kind of squashing the event, or passive destructive is like you just replace the event with your own, like you kind of one up them in a way. Or passive constructive is that, cool, nice, cool, bro. You know what I mean? You didn't really respond. It's almost fake. You weren't even really listening, and that doesn't help the relationship whatsoever. But active constructive is like, Noble, you tell me that you just launched EQ Mafia and you're really excited about it, this new group. And I ask you questions about it. I don't have to be super, I don't have to be fake and all extra. My voice doesn't have to hit a new octave while I'm asking you about it. But I can ask you, it's like, oh man, so how many people are in that new cohort that you got rolling through? Oh, tell me about some of the people. What that does is allow you to relive that moment and extend out. We call that the joy multiplier. Right. And I share this because this is very important, because we all do this for whatever reason. You're on the computer when your kids are talking to you and you're not even looking at them. You're working on something, like, yeah, that sounds good, honey. That sounds good. Right. That happens a lot. And what that does is it impacts and also teaches them that behavior is acceptable. And it kind of creates this loop. Right. But sometimes we act in this destructive manner, or all these other manners, because we actually care about the person so much. And it kind of sounds dumb, but if my cousin comes to me and tells me he buys a brand new motorcycle, and I ask him, oh my goodness, how much does that cost? Did you get a helmet that's DOT certified? Hey, did you know how many people get killed on motorcycles every day? I care about him, so I'm saying that. But now I just crushed the fact that he just shared me good news. And what that does after a long time is he's not going to want to share that good news with me anymore. Right. And then he's going to go share it with somebody else. And a great story that I would share, I had a friend that he ended up cheating on his wife. And he told me, and him sharing, he owned it. He realized he made such a mistake. But after this lesson, he learned why. And I took a lesson from this too. He said every time he took something home as good news to his wife. And like I said, I want to caveat this with, he didn't use this as an excuse, but at least it helped him be more aware. His wife would always crush any good news he ever brought home. It was how it affected her, everything else in between. Or like she would like not let him continue to share it. She would throw in her own stuff. She'd say the cools, nice, whatevers, all that stuff. And eventually he found somebody at work that did enjoy and was active constructive with his good news. And then a relationship started spanning and went too far, right? Because we all want the active constructive response. So for me, with my fiance, I want her to share all her good news with me. I'm selfish with her good news. I don't want her sharing her good news with somebody else, right? No, I want all of that. And for me to get that is I have to be deliberate about how I respond, right? So I think these are great lessons. That's just one particular skill that can really help. Think about it. Pause. When someone shares with you good news, don't make it about you. Ask them questions about that so that they can talk more about it. Don't just give them the cool. And if you are busy, ask them if you can, finish up whatever you're doing and then have that conversation with them. If you are worried about them getting a brand new motorcycle, have a conversation A and a conversation B. Conversation A, let them enjoy their moment. And then later on, conversation B, maybe, hey, have you thought about, did you get the right safety gear and all that stuff? But it doesn't have to be right then, unless they're about to jump on that motorcycle with their sandals and no shirt on, right? I mean, like maybe it doesn't have to have that conversation right there. So the conversation A versus conversation B is important. And active constructive responding, you can Google it. It has a lot of value to that. And this is one of the ones I think can affect your relationships immediately if you start practicing it.
Yo, bro. Of course you would body slam me because I invented ADD and ADHD. So bro, let me see. I'm again taking notes, and that's funny because I'm like, of course I'm, so it affects my attentiveness because I'm taking notes, so I'm not making the eye contact, and so I'm sure. Well, and of course, prior to me even learning some of this stuff, I definitely have been I've been the active destructive guy because the squirrel guy, like, oh yeah, okay, sure. What yeah. Oh, that's great, Joe. Oh, that's awesome, right? I've been the passive destructive guy. I've been the passive constructive guy, and it has been and still requires a lot of focus, intention, and attention to be the active constructive. And I still know that even after being so intentional, I know I'm not 100%. And that is such a great tool, the ACR, the active constructive responding, which is essentially active listening, right? Listening with, and I don't have the cool way that you just described it, but listening with your whole body, being totally mentally, emotionally, and physically present in that space with that person, and then demonstrating curiosity about whatever it is that person is sharing. And this is another thing too that I thought just while you were talking, like, what's going on? Why is that the most impactful? Well, I know for me, when someone does ACR with me, I feel seen, heard, and therefore valued.
Yeah.
And what's that worth in a relationship? It's
right.
Dude, that's priceless.
Right. My love language is affirmation. So, you know what I mean? So when words of affirmation is my love language. So for me, it does affect me quite a bit if I'm not getting some of that, and I think that active constructive responding is very important. And I've heard people after I teach this lesson, it's like, what if I really just don't care about the news? Like, it's like, it's hard for me to be all, happy-go-lucky. But I was like, well, one, I didn't tell you to be happy-go-lucky. I just told you to ask them some questions to help them talk about it a little bit more with curiosity, like you said, Noble. But the other thing is, how about we move the attention away from you and what you care about when it comes to the thing, and think about how much you care about that person, right? Do you care about the person, not the news, but the person? If you care about the person, then you need to live in this active constructive as much as possible, and also give yourself grace, because we all will slip out of it quite a bit.
Dude, so awesome. Care about the person more than the content. So true. I've heard something else recently that, parents of teenage children have a tough time connecting with the teens because the parents they don't value what the kid values, because, hey, let me tell you about my 3-hour Minecraft game, and the parents like, no, I don't care about your freaking Minecraft game. So to your point, it's not about the Minecraft game. It's about connecting with your kid.
Yeah.
right? It's about connecting with that person that hopefully you love. And so I love that, Joe, is it's not about the content or the topic, it's about the person and showing them that you love them and value them by listening.
Yeah.
Uh, Excellent, Joe. Oh man, dude. What hinders resilience?
Mm. So I think what really hinders resilience is a lack of self-awareness and a lack of optimism. And I know we kind of talked about it, but what happens is if you don't have the awareness, um, you're not going to even know where your shortfalls are, where your weaknesses are, what you need to work on, what's actually affecting how you're responding to things in life, whether it's other people or things that just happen to you. You know, some people are so unaware that they don't even realize that they lost it in a traffic jam. Like somebody will bring it up to them later. It's like, man, you kind of lost it back there. It's like, no, I didn't. What are you talking about? It's like, no, you just went on a giant rant. And it's so normal. It's conditioned behavior that is so normal that it's hindering a lot of things about their personal growth, but also their relationships. Because who wants to hang out with that person for a long period of time, right? That doesn't even have any awareness. So that's a huge part. The optimism, lack of optimism, like I said, I don't want to paint the picture that optimism's all about, unicorns and rainbows. It's about true optimism is influencing what you can control about a situation. So if you're in a dark tunnel in the cave, you don't see anything, right? The person that's pessimistic will just focus on how dark it is in there, where the optimist will see, might even feel, will listen and see, oh, I feel like there's some air going down there, or might be able to light a match if they have it and see that the smoke's going in a certain direction. Whatever it is, they're going to focus on what they can do about the situation versus everything that they can't do about the situation, right? And that's a huge part of it, because if you don't have optimism that you have some control or influence over a situation, it downward spirals to hopelessness right away, right? And that affects everything. So those two pieces I think are foundational, just foundational. And gratitude plays into optimism, right? Gratitude plays into hope. And I think that's why that's a great skill, is doing that gratitude journal. But yeah, if you don't have this, the lack of those two things will heavily impact your resilience negatively.
Joe, awesome. Love that. Lack of self-awareness, lack of optimism, and then even how, both of those can turn into conditioned behavior and are
Mm,
for many people. I know for me,
mm,
that turned into conditioned behavior for, I mean, my 98% of my life. So,
mhm.
and then I love that concept of true optimism is focusing about what we can actually control, focusing on, what we can actually control. And I've never done a deep dive on optimism either. And here's the irony, right? So I have used optimism as a coping mechanism for my lack of awareness.
Hmm. Hmm.
So for me, it was not coming from a healthy place, an emotionally healthy place. It came and developed as a coping mechanism for
Hmm.
lack of awareness, because I would look at my something that's called reality testing, which is another aspect of emotional intelligence. I've got access to a psychometric scientific emotional assessment, and one of the 15 areas that it assesses people on, leaders on, is reality testing. What's your ability to assess reality objectively? Well, because I had no self-awareness, I was not able to handle the emotions that came from looking at reality objectively. So my coping mechanism was optimism. And again, coming from an emotionally unhealthy place. So it wasn't,
Right.
again, I wasn't looking at, I'm optimist, Joe, because I'm looking at all the things I can control. No,
Mhm.
it was because I have no awareness.
Mm.
I'm gonna cope with just being. It was like toxic positivity, really, is what it was. It was
Yeah.
like,
Mm.
yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some people, and like I said, it's like a misdiagnosis of what optimism is. And they're like, oh, no, it'll all work out. You know, Jesus got the wheel. You know what I mean? Like, and just like, well, you like, yeah, that is optimism. And we definitely want to have the faith, but finding out what you can influence in a situation is what it's really about. Like, you don't have to sit on the couch and not have a job forever. There's things you can do, right?
Yes, and dude, another great. That's so funny, man. That's great. The Jesus takes the wheel, take the wheel. Well, I mean, dude, and I learned all those church
Mhm.
platitudes
Mhm.
in church, right? All those
Mhm.
cheesy religious things that yeah. Oh, God's in control. Okay, so does that mean that I just don't
Do
go to the
anything.
gym? I don't
Yeah.
work out. I don't
Hmm.
try to look for a job? Is because
Hmm.
God's in control? Like,
Right.
and listen, trust me, I'm not trying to say, hey, don't have faith. I'm with you, like absolutely have faith and
Hmm.
stuff, but we also have a responsibility
Right.
in God.
Right.
In fact, it was so funny story. Another part is when I was a lieutenant with a buddy of mine. I was infantry, he was an engineer. He literally was chugging a strawberry milkshake from some restaurant,
Hmm.
and he before we ate our food, he said, Lord, really, help me lose weight and get in shape. And then he took a big giant swig of his strawberry
Right.
shake, and I started
Right.
laughing. Right, and he's like, "Dude, what are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Dude, do you remember what you just prayed there? Help me lose weight, and you're chugging a
Yeah.
strawberry milkshake." Like,
Right.
we have a role to play in our own,
Right.
in
There's
our
a
own
my
recovery.
buddy, my buddy Caleb Vaden. He's a command chief. He had mentioned, we were just talking the other day, and he was like, life. I mean, the Lord will let you make a lot of decisions. Doesn't mean He blesses all of them, right? I mean, and not doing anything is a decision. To just sit there, right? Inactivity, a lack of response is still a response. It's just that's the one you chose to do. So I think it is really important. And the funny thing, what you just described about the milkshake, I had a guy tell me like how injury prone he is, and that's why it's affecting his health. And I was like, do you forget that we all saw you eat cotton candy for breakfast like not long ago? You know what I mean? Like, they might be interrelated, just a little bit.
That's right. That's great. And it also makes me and I mean, and so dude, I've done that myself, right, in my own life. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Well, and here's another great example that I have done guilty. For me, God helped me with finances while I'm spending money like it's going out
Mhm.
of style. Oh
Right.
God, help me win the lottery, or help me
Yeah.
get a job making a zillion bucks when I'm burning through money faster than I can, save it, whatever. So,
Yeah.
again, we have a role and responsibility. Another thing that made me think of is again Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is there are white belts. I've been doing it for about 4 years now. There are white belts. A lot of times what happens, we call it the white belt spaz. There's a phase of a white belt's career where, and it
Mhm.
was me, probably the first year, when I rolled with somebody, man, I would freak out. If I got in an
Yeah.
uncomfortable position, I would
Yeah.
just absolutely freak out. And which is not very resilient
Yeah.
behavior
Mhm.
in when life puts you in a chokehold. I mean, yes, freaking out is an option, right? That
Yeah.
is an option. But what happens is once you get emotionally triggered or emotionally hijacked, you physiologically, your brain goes to tunnel vision, fight,
Right.
flight, or freeze. It
Mhm.
goes to a survival mode of three
Yeah.
options. That's it. Well, when you are caught, so now I've been doing it for 4 years. Now, when I'm in bad situations or uncomfortable situations, I just think through, okay, I could turn my head this way, I could turn my head down, I could turn my head right. There's
Right.
almost an infinite amount of response of courses of action that you can choose to do. Some may work, some may not work, but freaking out is definitely not going to help anybody's ability to effectively make decisions. And so that
Yeah.
concept of becoming more resilient in our life, personally and professionally, I think is it. I mean, it's critical. It's
Yeah.
vital. It's priceless. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu example is spot on. When you're in those moments, like I know Scott told me when he was, white belt learning right at the beginning, he'd just tap out to anything. Somebody would just have his arm in a weird position and he just immediately tap out, right? Like you're tapping out nonstop. And but you think about it in life, it's like if you're not resilient and you're freaking out, you don't, that's a lot of people tap out. You're tapping out early. You don't even know what maximum potential you have. And your your example, the tunnel vision. I mean, That's a key component of resilience too, understanding that when and where the place is for the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And a lot of people say fixed mindset is always bad. It's like, no, the Lord didn't give us fixed mindset because it's always bad. Like, fixed mindset has a place too. If you're surviving, if you need to survive a moment, maybe this isn't the time to wonder. When the lion's running at you, maybe it's not time to think, I wonder what that lion's really real intent is. You know what I mean? Maybe you need to have that fixed mindset to do whatever it is. Just like emotions aren't bad by themselves. It's what we do with them, right? Anger doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's what we do with that anger, right? That could be bad. So it's important. The growth mindset, though, in that moment where you're being held down, and it will allow you to think of opportunities to get out of this and reverse it. So, the biggest problem we have as humans is we align the wrong mindset at the wrong time, or we put the emotions at the wrong time. We get into this fear moment where now it turns into anger when that really doesn't have any place here and it doesn't serve us. Right? This is the moment to maybe we ask questions and have a conversation versus just get angry and punch somebody. I mean, these are that's what it is. It's most of the times we're just aligning the wrong things at the wrong time. Then we label that's bad all together. It's like, no, it's not bad. Anger is not bad. It's what you did with it that was bad.
So true, man. Love that. It's love that. Emotions are not good or bad. Mm-hmm. They are information. It's data. Mm-hmm. It's not good data. And I mean, I guess technically there could be bad data, if you're, but it's emotions are not good or bad. It's how I explain it during my podcast a lot of times is pleasant or unpleasant emotions, or comfortable or uncomfortable emotions, but it's never good or bad or right or wrong emotions. There's no such thing as good or bad, and I love what you said. A lot of times we attach meaning, and a lot of times that meaning that we attach to things is not always accurate. Mm-hmm. And that narrative completely changes the trajectory of our decision-making and therefore behavior that does not always serve us in productive or healthy ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to, in resilience training that I've done, we call it the negative versus positive. And everybody's like, oh, negative means bad. It's like, no, they're negative and positive. Typically you'll tie negative like anger, fear, and all those things. And positive will be the happy and all that, but it doesn't mean they're bad. Like, just like a battery, you need a negative and positive terminal, right? I mean, you need both. So it's not that they're bad. They're labeled negative or positive. And I think as Lysa Turkhurst, I probably butchered her name, but she says it the best. Emotions are indicators, not dictators. Right. So they don't just shut out your emotion. Like, we're not saying just eliminate them, but they're just data, like you said. And maybe it's something to look inward or look outward.
Yes. Love that. That's excellent. Excellent, man. Emotions are indicators, not dictators. I've heard it said this way, emotions make terrible masters. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we allow them to take, and here's another kind of quote that made me think of that too a little bit, is kind of relating to the resilience a little bit, is you can tell the size of a man by the size of the things that make him angry. Mm-hmm. I like that. Right. That can reflect, my toothpaste, like I've heard husbands and wives fight on, well, you roll the toothpaste versus you squish it from the bottom. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't believe, what? Right, dude, like seriously, let's get some perspective here, right? Is that what you're going to lose your mind over? You're going to go to a 10, you're going to go to Hulk mode, because the toothpaste isn't the way you want it, right? Let's so again, resilience. I think that can be very closely related to resilience. Is how resilient are you? I think the other thing too that we haven't really jumped into, I think another way to test resilience or assess resilience is adversity. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I say regarding emotional intelligence is adversity reveals or exposes our emotional intelligence. Yeah. And I think the same can be said for resilience. Adversity reveals our resilience or lack thereof.
Yeah. And I think a result of, because that's definitely true, I think a result of being more resilient is that they did a test, and they're showing all these people, and they measured their resilience and all that through a calculator. I don't know how they did it, right? I'm not that guy, but they were showing that people that can look at the same event And a resilient person that's not, passes the resilient test. I don't know how they evaluate it. They typically see that adversity as a challenge they can overcome. Whereas a person that's less resilient, they have less optimism. I mean, they don't have that belief that they can influence things, and they can't see what it is. And they have less self-awareness. They will see that same event that other people see as a challenge that they can overcome as a complete burden, obstacle that they cannot surpass, and they end up going downward versus going over it. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting. There's a lot of results that come positively from being more resilient. Now, you're not resilient is it's better has no finish line when it comes to resilience. You're always working on it. It doesn't just stop. You don't just one day hit the platform and you're like, I'm resilient. Like, I mean, I have a lot of non-resilient moments, right? And a lot of times it is a hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So it's the awareness of understanding that. But something as simple as adversity is like what you just talked about, the toothpaste. Like that could be an adverse situation, right? You're like, what is going on with this toothpaste? And then you and your significant other, if you are more resilient and in a resilient mindset at that moment, you can be like, what just happened there? What does that toothpaste represent to you that made that? And it sounds like a lame conversation, but it might not be a bad one to have, because you're like, why did you just lose it on the toothpaste? What was going on there?
Excellent. And again, that takes a ton of awareness to do that, to catch yourself in the moment, like, okay, why? Yeah. And I love what you said. What does that represent? That's
Mhm.
powerful. Could I have resilience in the area of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but not in my marriage?
Yeah, I think that there is. Now, I wouldn't say, like, once again, bro science here. I think that you can be more resilient in one facet of your life than another, but it still is a result of your personal resilience overall. So, for instance, we gave that example of when you come home and now you're like not being as attentive because you just spent all of your energy at work and you're just worn out, and your significant other is just tolerating it for time and time and time and time. So and then that affects your overall resilience then, right? So I think that you can be more effective in one facet of your life for another. It could be timing, it could be a lot of different things, but I do think that overall, typically, if you are more resilient overall, that you're going to be more effective in every facet in life, because your self-awareness can be a big part of that. So I think a positive effect of resilience to me, honestly, is seeing that things, whatever it might be, as challenges. Like last week, I spoke in front of hundreds of people at a graduation. I think when I was less resilient younger, I would have thought, oh my goodness, what if I screw this up? I'm going to be remembered as that chief who couldn't freaking speak in front of people. I could, those are thoughts that might have happened, but now I see it as this is an opportunity to inspire. Other things like, oh, maybe this will open up more opportunities for me later. I can help people. Maybe somebody will go sign up for another class after this graduation speech. Whatever it might be. I see those more than I see the other stuff. The other stuff still exists. Like, I don't want to screw this up, but it doesn't consume me now. And I think one time I was taking a CLEP test. I was testing out of a college class, and I was a human resources class. I was like, I got this. First 8 questions were about international foreign relations with unions. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. So first 8, immediately, oh, I'm wrong. I'm just guessing. I'm like, less resilient Joe would have just got up and left. I'm like, you know what? What's the point? I don't want to waste the rest of my time. But instead, my mindset was, I'm already here. I blocked this off on my calendar. Let's just go frame by frame. We're bowling now, one frame at a time. I might have got, guttered the first 3, but let's go one at a time and see what happens. And I passed that test by like 6 points. So, you know what I mean? Because then I started coming through on questions I did know the answer to, but I would have just left. And I think about that often. Younger me would have just left. So I think you see things differently. You realize that you can affect things. You can see positive results if you reframe things. You have a lot of abilities that come from a more resilient mindset. But once again, there is no end to it. Like, it never ends. You will continuously be a work in progress when it comes to resilience.
Dude, money. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at begin to change.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Which is what you just got done saying, right? If you see things differently, that if you change your perspective, I love that. Okay, so wrapping up here, resilience resources. Do you have any resources that you have found for yourself or for your training when you're training other people in this area, books or podcasts,
Yeah.
resources, websites that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, so I think resilience overall, there's going to be plenty of different podcasts out there that you can listen to, including this one, of course, with you, Noble. I mean, like I said, resilience and emotional intelligence are just hand in hand, right? But I think there's a plenty of other ones because resilience is so holistic. Listen to some health podcasts. I mean, if you ever heard Matthew Walker talk on the multiple podcasts he's been on, he talks about sleep, how important it is. I mean, that's going to affect your resilience. Dr. Matthew Walker, he's been on Rogan, he's been on many others, but he'll freak you out about, because if you're not getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, he's going to talk about a lot of results of that. And you're like, oh, so you'd be better about sleep, but that's a huge thing. But anything that has to do with health relative to health, working out, exercising, those are going to affect your resilience, right? I think those are very good things out there. The Huberman Lab is a good one on just understand. Some of it gets real sciencey, so it might lose some of us, like me, like it's not smart enough to understand everything, but I do. But he says go buy some vitamins. I'm like, okay, I'll buy those vitamins because he's saying, and I think it's true. The other things that I would look at is getting into some programs like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or something else that's physical and mental. I mean, those are going to develop your resilience overall. The VME.org survey, the Values in Action survey, highly recommend doing that to help your self-awareness, understand what your strengths are. 360 surveys out there that are available, definitely good.
Can you tell me that website again? You said V and Me.
Oh yeah, VIA
Okay.
via me.org. Yep. Great survey. You can jump into there. And the books, I would say a really good book that a lot of the lessons I just talked about, the skills, they're all from this book. It's called The Resilience Factor. And that's by Dr. Karen Rivich, and she had a co-author on it, and I can't remember that person's name, unfortunately. Sorry, co-author. but The Resilience Factor was a great book, and it was actually what the lessons that Comprehensive Soldier Fitness and later Comprehensive Airman Fitness took on as their resilience model from the University of Pennsylvania. And I got to sit with 180 soldiers going through that course, and it was probably the one most life-changing lesson I've ever taken. And you're not going to get that from the book because it's a book versus actually being there and getting that from the source, from the member and having the interaction, but you're going to get a very close second by reading that book and understanding. Those are great. Dr. Seligman's Flourish is also a very good book, but also very sciencey. So just be able to be ready for it. But many other avenues there, but those are some good books to get you started.
Excellent. No, thank you, bro, for that. Okay. And how do we follow you, brother? How do we follow you? How do we find you?
You can find what me and the rest of the Llama Leadership team does at llama.leadership.com, or you can, and that's llama, LLAMA leadership.com. I've seen some people have told me that they were spelling llama wrong. So there are two L's in llama. And also you can follow me on LinkedIn, Joe Bogdan. You should be able to find me. And in our podcast, the Llama Lounge, you'll be able to look up Llama Lounge on all of the podcast platforms out there, to include Spotify, Amazon. You can find an Audible, and Apple Podcasts, etc. So you can find us there, and you'll be able to follow a lot of the stuff that we're doing.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I put all that stuff in the show notes for everybody, for you guys to be able to check out. Joe, thanks a million, brother. Cannot tell you how much I personally have gotten out of this. I'm really excited to go through and review all my notes. And thank you for being committed to become the best version of you, because, again, you just got done sharpening me for the past hour and my audience. And I appreciate that. I know you've added tremendous value to all of us and all the people that you add value to on a daily basis in all the different things that you're doing. So thank you, bro, for making that commitment and investment in yourself that has made you better to make me better and those around us. Man, I'm very, very thankful for you, Joe.
Man, Noble, thank you so much, man. I'm so honored to call you a brother and love taking this journey with you and can't wait till the new project that we're working on together comes out. You're amazing. I love talking to you. When we thought about that new project that we'll unveil soon, we're being real clandestine about it right now, but you're one of the first people I thought of because of how much impact and influence you have. And I love how you inspire people. And that's maybe one of the last things I'll just share. Resilience is part of that is staying inspired. Find ways to
Mm.
stay inspired. And we've all worked for the uninspired leader before. We've all been around uninspired people, and you got to find inspiration. And you can do that in so many ways. And some people say, hey, find a hobby. Well, one of the reasons why you need to find a hobby is stay inspired in life. It will affect who you are as a person, as a leader, as a coworker, as a family member. When you are uninspired and you're just going through the grind of making the donuts every day and just kind of going through the motions of participating in life, it will affect your resilience and your influence on people. So stay inspired. I do that through photography, the podcast, talking to the amazing people like you, reading, continuously growing. Find ways to continue to stay inspired, keep growing.